the original Appleseed, the fans were very excited because they've basically seen the potential of CGI animation, how it can be done.
So for Ex Machina, we really wanted to take it to the next level.
From the city to the characters, we really set out to raise the level of detail and density across the board.
We had a lot of lessons that we've learned from the first film in terms of action, emotional factors.
We really wanted to bring these characters to life, and you can't do that without emotion.
The actors, I mean, when they were screaming, you know, if they were crying, they were crying.
I've never worked on or voiced anything that looks like this before.
The idea of doing a big action film without any kind of compromise because it's animated. I mean, it is this new type of digital cinema that we've been talking about doing for a long, long time.
Appleseed was unlike anything we had ever attempted before. It wasn't cell animation, it wasn't standard CG work. It was an entirely new animal, so we were kind of learning as we went along.
When we finished the first film, I was pleased, but I felt like the world of Appleseed begged to be realized in even greater detail. So heading into Ex Machina, we really had our work cut out for us.
In Masamune Shiro's original work, the backgrounds are incredibly complex. Bringing greater realism to this world is a tremendous challenge, not only because the CG models have to be more complicated, but because there has to be layer upon layer of them.
In the city of Olympus, I wanted to give a sense of real life. People walking, living their lives, even little details like street signs and storefronts. It's a sprawling metropolis, and I wanted to see more of it.
The scope of the production was much bigger in Ex Machina. From a design standpoint, we had almost twice as many set pieces as the first movie, but we had to do it in the same amount of time. So we had a stable of 70 artists working constantly.
I get all these rough sketches that are designing props or guns down to the last detail. You know, they talk about, oh yeah, this, you know, this line shouldn't be like this, and the chain should look like that. And it's like, who watches that, you know? But that's the level of detail they really go into when designing things like this and animating it.
There were various mecha directly from Shiro's original story that we wanted to bring to life in CG. We knew we had to make them look cool and futuristic, but they would also have to work within the context of the world. They had to be real and bear close scrutiny.
You really notice the details on the mech designs. A lot of the shots, you could say maybe are fetish shots of the mech designs. It could be guns, it could be the walkers, it could be any number of pieces of machinery in the film.
But in Shiro's world, every detail is important, so you can't really focus on any one thing. You have to focus on everything, especially the characters.
In the first movie, the characters have a more iconic look, but here we went with a three-dimensional approach to make them appear more human.
Briareos, it's not really clear where the man begins and when the machine begins. It's a very enigmatic character, and it just makes you really curious about what's ticking inside of him.
Briareos is a pretty complicated character to build. He's got to be powerful like a tank, but he can't be so strong that you forget a human heart beats inside that metal frame. So when we updated his design for Ex Machina, we focused on striking a better balance between mecha and human.
Dunin is an elite soldier herself, but she's also got sex appeal. To truly reflect these human traits, we dropped some of the exaggerated features like the big eyes, and enhanced her overall physicality for a more natural look.
We wanted Dunin to look more like a real person, but we didn't want to sacrifice her unique outward appearance. So from the pencil sketch to the computer model, we let her attitudes and personal sense of style inform everything we did.
I might need to have him look at my eye scope.
Oh, stop it.
Interestingly enough, we had Prada getting involved. The Mrs. Prada herself. She really liked the first film and she offered to design a couple of costumes for Dune, which is, you know, cream on top, basically.
Showing off the art, showing off the technique. That's a visual tradition in anime. There might be just a very quiet moment where they do something visually or something stunning, a piece of action. A viewing of a particular character and having it as if you got a camera rotating around it.
Hand-drawn anime, once you draw it on the storyboard and you draw cells, you're locked. You know, you can't do anything about it.
The advantage to using CG is that you can pre-visualize the action in the animatic stage. You can sort of experiment with the virtual camera and really discover what's working and what's not.
With CG, you can really dream up any aspect of the film, from shot composition to dynamic camera moves to the editing. In this sense, it's like a live-action movie. In the CG environment, you can really put the camera anywhere you want, and so it enabled us to stage some pretty dramatic action.
Some of the earlier attempts in some shows doing 3D didn't have the effect of weight or actual contact with things.
What Ex Machina does better is it improves on the 2004 film with just a sense of weight and gravity to the characters.
You feel that when somebody's running, they're running. When somebody's hitting something, they're hitting something. It doesn't look like a puppet running around.
Like the first film, we used motion capture to recreate human movement in the CG environment.
Fire!
The most exciting part about the motion capture process is that you get to see real live actors perform in front of you. I gave them direction from my storyboard, but during the performance, the actors would improvise, bringing their own unique behavior to the character.
Happy birthday, Hitomi.
How lovely.
For Ex Machina, we had a larger studio for motion capture, and it really gave us a lot of flexibility. We could have as many as 10 actors working at the same time and stage much more complicated scenarios.
For exaggerated stunts that were done in the spirit of science fiction, we divided the action into multiple parts. This way, the human actor could do each step individually. Then our animators stitched the parts together, which enabled us to create some pretty cool animations.
We also wanted to capture the subtleties of human body language, specifically the actors' facial expressions. So we used a technique we explored in the 2004 film called facial motion capture.
But unlike the first Appleseed, we were able to record the Japanese dialogue in advance. This made it possible to map the voice actors' expressions as they delivered their lines, and in turn, animate these facial movements in a more realistic fashion.
You'll notice that in Ex Machina, characters now have fully articulating jaws. So when a character talks, his chin moves.
Looks like we missed the party. I told you to play it cool.
There's always an interesting balance between motion capture and artists' rendering. And I noticed in some of the action scenes, the motion capturing was quite well done. But how do you take something that's computer generated and humanize it?
Entire feature films based around computer graphics have been kind of hit and miss in the past. It seems to work okay with sort of cartoony kind of characters and humorous situations, but when you're doing action, adventure, spectacle, you're looking at something that's striving for realism, but isn't quite there, and the artificiality is kind of distracting.
There's something about just the nature of the way people actually look and interact, the little movements that people have that we see and perceive with our eyes that's almost impossible to capture on computers.
So what we did on both Appleseed and Ex Machina was to use a technique called toon shading, which applies a look of hand-drawn animation to CG. By stylizing the film in this way, we hope to make our CG characters more accessible and more expressive.
The first film was a transitional stage from CGI-based characters to kind of appeal to old-time anime fans. But the new film went to a more fully rendered palette that helped integrate the characters much more into the background.
It's more pleasing to the eye, it seems a little more natural, but it always is going to have a surreal quality to it. And I think that's kind of its strength.
What you're doing is bringing back in the human element and the human artistry and kind of bringing a soul back into CG animation. And I think it succeeds quite well in this film.
俺はデュナンのパートナーだからな。
In Japan, the voice acting is regarded as its own art form and as integral to the storytelling. When that comes to the West, it's one of the first things that gets basically sacrificed. There are plenty of times where animated films have been deep-sixed by dreadful voice acting.
In America, casting was very nail-biting because I only had a few days to really end up with a cast and get it approved by the director. And how do you do that with, you know, the director residing in Japan? And what if he doesn't like it? And what are we going to do then? We were very fortunate to have ADV, who provided English localization services. So in terms of caliber of people, we got top tier.
Shut up and hold it.
A little more. A little more. Give me a little more. Like the mouth wipe too. You know, kind of, you know. Hold it.
Appleseed was such a great advancement of the art form. You just look at like the textures and the facial expressions were really real, and the storytelling was really, really strong. We knew we were dealing with a really high level of talent, and we wanted to make sure that we brought our A game to the party.
First and foremost, you have this pre-existing work, and you want to honor it. We're trying to somehow compete with something that's already great in its native language.
今日は仮装パーティーが
I always listen to the Japanese because the voice of the Japanese actor can give you ideas, it can give you fuel.
Can you turn up the Japanese just a little bit?
When you're dubbing Japanese anime, you always are faced with this kind of challenge.
CG is a harder animal to tackle than regular cell animation.
A lot easier to match flaps if it's rah, 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 rah. But when it's kind of, it's really difficult to dub that kind of stuff because a human mouth or even a CG mouth moves so much quicker and subtly than an animated cartoon mouth.
And if it's not coming out of the actor's mouth very well, you know you got to change it. That's what I loved about Joseph is he wanted to be there for every moment of the recording, and we never get that. And he was always the one who would say, that's not working for me. I think it can be fresher.
More passion on the whole, you know, not this way thing.
Certain things in Japanese might sound really corny over here. So we had to adapt it, obviously. For example, that whole pink landmaid issue.
どうだポセイドンの最新型は
In Japanese, it's a very mundane line. When Junon first sees the landmaid, but in English, we have to say something about this being pink. I was just throwing it to the ADR director, Steven, and then he just comes up with,
If it wasn't pink, I'd be writing it.
That's a hell of a lot better than, you know, hey, how's the new model?
One of the big issues, you know, how are you going to show emotions with this big metal rabbit that can't smile or nod or wink or whatever? Finding ways to convey his emotions was a real challenge.
The danger of playing someone who is a machine, you know, or a part machine, is you get into a bit of a flatline thing, something that stays within this certain range. The thing about Briarios is there's gotta be the struggle, being known as this amazing warrior, but also having the true human feelings of fear.
What's happening to me? What?
The beauty of dubbing that you don't get to do on a film is that you get to go in the same linear progression, which is fabulous because you've gone through the whole journey, and when he screws you over, you're blindsided. David could really get into that.
So, you know every move I'm gonna make, don't you?
When you look at Briarios' arc, he really goes through a lot of pain, and you punish him more and more as you know, until the end. Some of the Foley's that he did, all the screaming and eye in pain, you actually notice that his voice progressively got tired and more scratched as we went.
Because of the CG and because of the animation, I got to really experiment with this tough girl, especially in scenes where you've got lots of acrobatic and fighting and all kinds of things going on.
It's no use, dude. We have to.
Let's shut up and hold him.
Shut up and hold
That's
it. Good job.
Oh, shut up, you.
But when it gets down to that emotional moment, you have to be able to pull that off too.
It's me, I'm here. Here. I'm always here.
Lucy was really feeling it. She was able to really touch the core of the character.
In Ex Machina, it was about trying to take these very charged moments and these very action-packed kind of things and just trying to really stick to a realistic type sound.
But the animation just lent itself to that. Every actor that came in the booth fell in love with the visual, and the visual informed their performance so much more than a regular cell animation does.
Brie Oreos. Brie Oreos.
And that's what ultimately makes it fantastic for the viewer, is because they know they're watching a true moment, and that's what we had in the studio.
There have been few examples of realizing this sort of drama with CG animation. But in Ex Machina, we rarely did it.
In Japan, there's a belief that the computer graphic is just one more color on your palette. It's just one more painting technique. It doesn't usurp any of the other techniques you have, but it can be very powerful if used very smartly.
For so many years with hand-drawn cell animation, the Japanese were striving for a lot of the things that you had in live-action cinema. So now when they're doing three-dimensional animation, they've preserved a certain aesthetic that they had established. And Appleseed's a wonderful example of that.
Still, some hardcore anime fans outside Japan may think that Appleseed breaks from tradition too much, or that it even endangers 2D animation. I don't really look at it this way because I think both art forms have their merits. To me, it's not about which process is better, it's about which one works best for the material. So in the case of Ex Machina, 3D was clearly the best way to tell the story.
What I really liked when I was watching this movie is that this certainly is a Hollywood-level production.
And it was a combination of all the elements. The enhanced textures, the toon shading, the physics involved in the movement, the background details.
The way the camera is moving, the way it's cut, the wide frame, the storyline. I think that Appleseed is part of a new film language for animation.
Appleseed will start opening that door towards 3D CG animation. Doesn't mean 2D animation will disappear, but certainly a changing of guards and a new blood into the system.
We like to think of Ex Machina as being in a genre all by itself. As Aramaki-san calls it, high-definition animation.
HD animation.